The word vocation comes from the Latin word vocare, which means a calling. Everyone has a calling of some kind. Takes who knows how long to discern what that calling is. Been told it takes 2 to 3 years sometimes it's your entire life. So, my own vocation, been trying to figure that one out. It's hard to figure what one's calling is if there's too much noise in your head about what you think you should be doing, rather than paying attention to the world and seeing what the world has to say of what you should be doing. But it's not so much the world, not the physical world, not the stuff around us, as it were, but the inner truths that are alive within it. My own vocation, well, let's see. It's said that there are 3 vocations. One is that being chosen to minister to the people, to bring them through the path of faith. In the church, this is the priesthood. For others, it's the contemplative life, divided from all the noise and trappings of the world, which can be hermitage or monasticism or any other number of things like that. The third vocation is that of family, in raising children in a rightful path, in being the guardian, steward, and teacher of your family, in having a life where you find the fullness of God in unity with another through marriage. Within that, there are vocations, there's like suborders of that. Which really is just anything that you're called to in life. I know no matter what, whether I join a priesthood or become a monastic, or if I'm the patriarch of my own family, one way or another I'm going to be an artist, for one, and an evangelist and a catechist, or otherwise teacher. The very idea of vocation is a fascinating one, because you could be called to all 3. Remember, vocation means a calling. However, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be chosen for that calling. Many are called, but few are chosen, as I said. And you can't, when it comes to trying to answer to a vocation, you can't just look at it in a vacuum of, what is the world immediately trying to say? Because you're called to whatever calling it is that is supposed to be your part and parcel in life, both through the present moment and what the world calls you to then, as well as the life you've lived and the life you will live, past, present, and future. Because in the grand scheme of things, there's only eternity, and your calling is firmly rooted in eternity, because everything is supposed to call unto something greater. Your life, only in some respects, is your own, but you also have to realize that your life touches everything else. That your life is a part of the world, and yes, it's true that we're in the world, but not necessarily of it. However, we also have to remember that we are in the world, and our actions and all things that come of them will touch others in eventuality. So take care when finding what your vocation is. Myself, it's hard to say what my vocation is. A lot of people say I'm a natural homilist, a natural orator. Other people say that I am a highly intellectual, contemplative person, and I certainly feel that myself. Others feel like with a face like mine and the pastoral quality around me, it would make sense to not be married and have a family to bring up in the faith. I guess. All these things are true. Considering that we have to look to our past as well as our future just as much as the present to figure out what our vocation is. And it's interesting looking into my own past. So my past is a weird one. I grew up in a very spiritual family. Always looked at the esoteric and the mysterious and the hidden. Come from a family of scholars, to say the least. Myself, I had a weird way of it. So my family fell away from the Catholic Church when I was 8, I think. It was either 6 or 8, somewhere in there. And after that, as the years progressed on, I just did crazier and crazier things. Eventually, I'd find myself in institution after institution. Not good ones either. It was all the kinds of places where you lose your freedom. And eventually, because of the troubles that happened there, both in those institutions and in the places in between institutions, I got involved in a lot of bad things. Crime was the least of them. I was very deeply involved with drug use and occult things. So my family, for a little while, my father decided that we'd be Jewish, and then after a bit we became Buddhist. And it was interesting looking into all those different paths, seeing all the different ways that people experienced reality and eternity. Eventually, it would get to the point where essentially I lost 14 months of my life and found myself behind bars, and that's a story for who knows, I don't know, it's a much later time, or maybe only if I decide to talk to you personally, I don't know. But in that space, I lost myself for a while. I tried to forge my own path in faith. I essentially started a cult at one point, and decided that there was no particular way about anything, no particular truth that seemed to fit, so I had to make my own. And then after I got back out into the world and started really trying to find my place in it again, things fell apart more and more. Bad relationships, poor choices, self-abuse of many kinds. And eventually, my family would split apart, and I found myself on my own, sleeping on a fishing dock in Florida, and abandoned homes in, industrial parks and stuff like that. And it was only maybe roughly 2 years that things were like that, but eventually the greater 10 years after that period, or including that period, time's a little hazy for me in that respect, in those things. But those 10 years would be harrowing, to say the least, and eventually I found myself in and out of halfway houses, and then After a 5-day trip on a Greyhound bus, I would find myself in the Pacific Northwest. And after so long, living in a home shelter, ruminating on the fact that my life had become what it is, I decided, why not? Let's try church. Let's try the Catholic faith. And went up to a big old church up the way from the shelter that I was staying at. Come to find out, like a year or so later, that happens to be the church that I was baptized in. And then they directed me to another church up the way, when it turns out they weren't holding a mass or anything. And heard the Catholic Mass, heard the Kyrie sung in Latin, driven to tears, and I just kept coming back. And eventually I joined the choir and started singing in Latin myself. And life became so much richer beyond my wildest dreams, and so much depth and beauty, and it restored a childlike wonder that had been lost. And now I stand before you today, how I am, whatever that is. And I still don't know what my calling is. I don't know what I'm doing or where I'm going, but I know, at least now, that there is a path, that I do have a calling of some kind, that it will be answered at some point. But I still have to discern exactly what that is. So, yeah, that's where my life is at. Kind of. It's a little bit of my story. But trying to really figure out what you're doing in life has little to do with what you want, and more to what all the world and the will of God and His designs for you and His glorious creation, what the great will of the Creator, what it has to say as to what you should be doing. Jesus, thy will, not mine, be done. But we'll see where it all goes eventually. Thanks for listening. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.